And good morning. Welcome to the first hour here of the Chris McCarthy Show. As I promised you, we have Congressman William Keating here on the line. We're going to bring him on momentarily. He's got some, he's going to break some news for us, which I appreciate here on the show, regarding the son-in-law of our president. Something I've personally, even though I'm a Republican, been kind of, let's say, more than interested in, the Jared Kushner and his relationships. All right. Good morning, Congressman Keating. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Chris. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, I think this is a wonderful addition to the program. So I have in front of me a media advisory regarding Jared Kushner from your office, sir.
Yes.
Tell our listeners what your concerns are. This seems to be breaking news.
Well, it certainly was news over the night that Jared Kushner has not been and will not, by all appearances, be given top secret clearance. He'll only be giving secret clearance, and the difference is monumental. The difference is essentially the things that really are top, secrets. He's been there in his position for over a year now, privy to that. And what's occurred as this has been looked at this morning is the fact that now we're finding out through our own intelligence that several countries have targeted Jared Kushner because of his lack of experience and because of his financial debt, which is over $1 billion that's going to come due in a short period of time, as a target of weakness for our country. So these are really troubling, no matter which party you're in, no matter what. In terms of our national security, these are really troubling events that have occurred. What we gave people today and what you might have, it's been a concern of mine now for several months. When the Secretary of State, Secretary Tillerson, was in front of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I was very concerned about what indeed Jared Kushner's role was, because he had no portfolio, and it's very important in terms of our national security that there's a briefing before, there's a briefing afterwards, a debriefing, that our national security people and our State Department people know who he's going to talk with, what meetings occurred, what transpired, that he's prepared for those meetings, and he's debriefed afterwards so that we know what's going on from the other country's perspective, what they're trying to do. And it was troubling to find out that he had been involved in several meetings with foreign officials and didn't even notify our national security people. They weren't aware of it. And certainly our State Department people were not aware of it. My questioning months ago with the Secretary of State was, does Jared Kushner, who's going to these countries, does he coordinate? Does he at least alert the State Department where he's going?
Right.
Are you briefing ahead of time? Are you talking about the information afterwards? It was a real concern because I had no idea, and the committee that has oversight over much of this that I'm on, we had no idea what he was doing. And what you're going to see and what we put together is a small questioning period I had with the Secretary was the fact that evidently he did not know either, which was pretty shocking to me at the time. Yes.
We're speaking with Congressman William Keating here from Massachusetts about this news on Jared Kushner. I could tell you, I'm a Republican, but I thought when he began to get all these different responsibilities from the White House, I first thought, boy, Donald Trump doesn't like his son-in-law because he's a young guy, and how can he succeed at all of this stuff? And he really has no experience doing anything on a foreign policy level, correct?
That's correct. And he was tasked with solving the Mideast crisis. He was tasked with so many, dealing with the greatest controversies. And what was shocking is now we're learning that I had great suspicions of or concerns for before, that he was essentially freelancing this. When we go to another country and meet with officials, as we do, we are briefed by the State Department before. We have in-country briefings by the CIA, our FBI, our State Department people, and the people on the ground there, because it's so important that there's no doubt about what we're saying, what we're being asked. And also, besides the fact that we could have information go forward, and he was privy to the most secret information our government has, the crown jewels of what the information, far beyond even what all but 8 members of Congress have. So he's at that level, and to find out that he wasn't even informing our national security people or our State Department that he was having these meetings with other countries was just astonishing and frightening, frankly. And this all came to light, as you recall, because there was the person that, sort of filters the mail and the correspondence for the president in a secured facility, who was involved in, domestic violence issues with his wives and the potential for that. It was only at that juncture that questions began to ask, well, how did he get that position without security clearance? And then to find out there was over 20 people in the administration that were privy to this information that didn't have security clearance is something that there's no words to explain the threat to our country that results from that. And
it's indefensible. I mean, I support the president. I voted for the man, but it's absolutely indefensible.
And to think that someone who has this kind of debt is that vulnerable, in some of the countries that we were able, at least it's now been revealed through our own intelligence that countries like Israel and the United Arab Emirates and China had all assessed him as vulnerable because of his financial debt, which is huge debt, and his inexperience. Yeah. And then to realize that he wasn't even coordinating with our national security people or our State Department with these meetings he was having with officials is a frightening thing. So I think that it was a concern I had. And I thought months ago when I was questioning the Secretary of State to really see what his place was, how he was working with our other officials. If you ever see the tape that we sent you of the hearing, it'll at the end, in my frustration, I said to the Secretary of State, exactly what does Jared Kushner do? Right. And the Secretary of State shrugged his shoulders and said, you'll have to ask Jared Kushner. Right. Now, this is someone representing the United States of America and someone who's the son-in-law of the president. And so these officials, and someone who, frankly, was trying to resolve his debt situation before he assumed office just a short time ago, and his family still is, trying to make deals with China and with countries like Qatar, 2 countries that he was having meetings with. So think about the impression of this. I mean, this is a conflict of interest that is off the charts. He is, a few months before, because of his over $1 billion debt that he has that's coming soon, being called on soon, he was trying to market these countries for investments to alleviate his debt. And then he changes hats and is having meetings with the officials from these same countries. I mean,
it's unbelievable.
I don't know. I hope there's a review and oversight. It'll have to be done in classified session just to see what transpired at these meetings and what was said.
And Congressman, again, we're speaking with Congressman William Keating here from Massachusetts. I think, I don't know about his integrity, but certainly his inexperience and he's only in his early 30s with having never been involved in this world before. And it's a tough world, right? When those other intelligence agencies, that's what they look for, right? Don't they comb the world looking for this?
This was, exactly. They look for any semblance of a crack. Well, this wasn't a crack. This was a cavern. And think about it this way, Chris. They've been in, this administration has been there. Jared has been in that position for over a year. And in that period of over a year, at the high level he was, and the son-in-law of the president, they were working to give him this clearance. And they weren't able to do it.
Right. That's very important detail.
Besides the fact that when he was going through his early clearance, not once, not twice, 3 times or more, he had to go back after he didn't put different facts in his application for this clearance, saying, "Oh, I forgot to put down this business interest. Oh, I forgot to put this business interest." I mean, there's red flags right from the beginning here.
It's look, as I've said numerous times, and the folks here who listen to us regularly know, I support the president, but I don't know how anyone could defend this. As you just pointed out, Congressman, it's not like they didn't get around to giving him a security clearance. They've been trying to give him a security clearance, and he can't pass the test.
I know. There's certain staff members that don't have anywhere near that level of classification that Jared Kushner was getting information from, and it takes months of scrutiny. They look at your background, they look at your finances, they look at your friends, they talk to the people you used to work for.
Right.
They go through scrutiny. Years ago, when I was a young guy working my way through school, I applied for the post office, and they were interviewing my neighbors
right.
and friends. I mean, but that's just to work at that level, to be at the level, the same level as the President of the United States in terms of knowing our state secrets, the most confidential information we can get, what our intelligence agencies are finding on these other countries that we can't, people's lives are on the line. Mm-hmm. We're getting information from many of these countries where people, if it was ever revealed who was giving this information to us, the sources and methods of our finding intelligence, they would be killed.
Right.
So, I mean, and our country's security would be compromised. So that this is what was at stake. And someone who is on committees that deal with this kind of information, knowing the scrutiny they give everyone else, this is really troublesome.
And let's I think what needs to be reminded here to folks is that he's just so young. I'll give the man. I'll say the man until I see something that he doesn't have integrity. That's fine. I'll leave that alone. But he's just so young. I don't think he would even know if he was being compromised or being put in a situation. But and I also think, he's very close to countries that are allies of ours personally. But they do have very aggressive espionage programs here in this country, although we don't like to talk about it. But I remember when Netanyahu came over here and said, "I've known you since you were this high," and he put his hand down by his knee, I thought, geez, I don't know if that's a great thing.
Now, one of those countries that was cited in our own intelligence, besides China, was Israel as well.
Yeah, it's people don't like to talk about it. They are an ally of ours.
They're an ally, but they spy on us.
They spy on us all the time, and you don't have to go back to the Pollard case to know about so much stuff that has gone on. Allies spy on each other, and
what was really concerning to me too, and should concern everyone, is how this finally surfaced. And I mentioned it briefly, but we would have never known this.
Right.
It only came about because the president's personal, secretary, he's the one that decides what is put in front of the president for information on a daily basis. It was only when he was, when the concerns about him and his domestic violence, and we saw the pictures of his wife and the injury she had, only when that came about and the press started to ask questions, well, how did he get the security clearance?
Right.
And then they found out he didn't. But they allowed him in that role, not having the security clearance. That prompted all kinds of press inquiries to say, well, how many other people haven't got security clearance yet? So it's I think they should be looking at not just Jared Kushner, but particularly him, because he's having these meetings, but at all levels to find out if those 20 or more people had information, what did they have as access, and really have to go back and see if there's been much damage done. The problem with this is it'll almost be impossible to assess.
Right.
And if you're having private meetings, and McMaster's, security head of our country, to put it in layman's terms, or the head of all our international responsibilities, the Secretary of State, if they don't even know you're having the meeting, that's pretty frightening.
We're speaking with Congressman William Keating here from Massachusetts. Congressman, so where does this go from here?
Well, I think that clearly John Kelly now has been tasked with saying if you don't have the clearance, then you're not going to get the information. It's over a year late in that effort, and I do think that when you're the son-in-law of the president, I think people walk around you in a tepid manner. They're afraid to do it. That's another problem,
right,
frankly, in doing this. Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General for John Kennedy, and there was always scrutiny around that that came with it. This is, a situation where we're getting this top level of clearance and not having this even come to light unless it was for the other investigation that occurred and the fact that that individual did not have a security clearance that we found out about this. We could have kept going on for years, perhaps, without this being addressed.
It's very disappointing, I will tell you, Congressman, which is probably an understatement. But it's just very disappointing. It's very concerning.
Yesterday's testimony by Admiral Michael Rogers was concerning, where we learned a testimony that the president has rejected his efforts to deal with the Russia attack. And he was asked, well, what message do you think that sends to the Russian government? And he said, it sends the message back that you could do this and we're not going to do anything about it. So there's really some, we get caught up every day in the controversy of the day.
Right.
But if we can't as a country deal with our intelligence issues, our top secret information, our ability to not only gather that information and have sources that can feel comfortable they won't be killed if things get in the wrong hands, but also confidence of them going forward. How much will they share with us when they're reading in the publications that this information isn't secure? It really is a problem not just of what happened. It's a problem going forward that we're going to have a lot of work to get back that trust.
No, it's again, folks, we're speaking with Congressman William Keating. By the way, folks, if you're just tuning in, this interview will be available on the WBSM YouTube channel in its entirety if you haven't been able to catch the entire thing. I think it's important you listen to it because the Congressman's breaking some news here for us, and that's why we have him on. Look, Congressman, as you pointed out earlier, how do you do an assessment of the possible damage here? I know if you look back, and this does not rise to the level of Alder James or Hansen at the FBI, certainly at this point, but when you go back and look at the damage assessments and what has been compromised, what possible systems have people learned about, not because Kushner gave it up because he wanted to, but he may have given it up because he didn't realize what he was saying. He's learning things, but he's such a level of inexperience that he may be saying things, or he may think people are his friends that really aren't his friends.
There's a level of conflict as well. Your listeners might remember this, but even when he separated himself from his own company with this massive debt, this liability on, his sister, on behalf of the company, was in China making presentations for investors to bail them out. And they were showing pictures of him with his position as a special advisor to the president. So that conflict is real. And when you're facing the clock, as the reports indicate, that maybe I think the time frame might be the next year or so, when they have to come up with over $1 billion to pay this debt off, and they're going to these countries, Qatar and China, and saying invest in our business here to bail us out. That conflict of interest is gigantic.
Congressman, this is very, very, very disappointing. Look, I just want to shift gears here for a second, although I'm fascinated by this, and I appreciate you sharing this with us. To you just signed on with about 100 other congressmen or more on doing something about guns in this country. Can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, I think that we had a meeting yesterday with a task force dealing with this. It's chaired by a Vietnam veteran and an NRA member, Mike Thompson from California, and he's leading an effort with many of us to try and just deal with some improvements in gun safety. while still preserving the Second Amendment. And his leadership has been great in that regard. There's bipartisan support for some of these measures, but it's going to be difficult to deal with. But things are occurring outside of the House of Representatives. The Senate is in session, dealing with these issues, discussing these issues, and I don't know what opportunities we'll have in the House to do that.
It looks to me, without knowing it all exactly, but it looks to me like basically the bill you're sponsoring would take the federal gun laws and make them similar to what we already have here in Massachusetts. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, in terms of Massachusetts, it would be, I think Massachusetts would even be further with many of the things they're doing in terms of trying to improve safety. The federal government's a lot harder because you have states and constituencies that have different beliefs, generally speaking, than here. But we really have to do something. I had the occasion in the hallway as I was going from meeting to meeting. I came across a group of students from Parkland, Florida, the students that have been involved in lost friends in dealing with these issues. And I talked with them, and they're quite impressive young people. They're bringing a new focus, I believe, to the issue of gun safety. I come from a police family. There was guns in our house when I was growing up. Never knew where they were, but and the thing that is frustrating, there is a majority of people, I believe, in Congress, and clearly, according to polls, a vast majority of the public that believe there has to be changes, and they include changes that we have comprehensive background checks. I mean, that's a basic. And make sure that the systems are working properly. A lot of the states, maybe because of budget reasons, maybe because of political reasons, aren't participating the way they're supposed to do in providing information in a timely fashion. Those things, there's a great consensus around that. There's a consensus about dealing with mental health issues. I don't know if there's a majority on something that is in Massachusetts. Something I believe in is, on assault weapons, banning those. That's going to be harder to get a majority, perhaps, of the House members. But there are things we could do going forward and must do. We know there's going to be other tragedies. And, these aren't one-issue solutions, but taken as a whole, we can improve safety in our country. And we really should do this, and there should be some urgency around doing this. And we'll see if once again this is rekindled. But it's, again, the politics of doing this is difficult. But we can do things to make our country safer in this regard. And when it comes to some of the weapons, you just have to look at the fact that the number of rounds that you can get off, in 10 seconds, some of these weapons, you can get 90 rounds off in 10 seconds. I mean, that's a one-person army. And the issues of bump stocks, I think if that were put to the floor for a vote, and it might be in the Senate, and hopefully in the House, that could be something that would be majority support to ban those. So let's go ahead and start to make some progress on this area. It's going to be demanded by the public, and I think it's interesting. I saw some of my colleagues in Florida that were staunch, supporters of, gun rights, even with, assault weapons, even liberalizing the current laws. And after that tragedy occurred in their state, they have come around and now are on the other side supporting bans on assault weapons and background checks and those issues. It shouldn't take tragedies in each state by state. It's no coincidence that in Connecticut, after Sandy Hook, there's strong consensus with their congressional delegation. Now there's strong consensus, much stronger in Florida. In Las Vegas, you saw people after those shootings. The way to build support is not wait till it happens in your state and then switch gears and say it has to happen now. I mean, all of us live in a country together where these threats occur and can occur. I deal, as you know, I'm a ranking member on the committee that deals with terrorism. Mm-hmm. If you look at the websites, not advertising which ones, right. The websites of some of these terrorist groups that we can see in our own country, they will give you step-by-step instructions how to get a gun easily.
Well, speaking with Congressman William Keating of Massachusetts, my concern is I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I don't understand why these bump stocks were ever put on the market. Personally, I just get a little concerned that with some of the rhetoric on this, so people get confused on what weapons are actually available for people. But I'll tell you this: we had a Fairhaven police officer here right after the tragedy, and we were talking about the problems down in Florida, where the police went to that house 37 times, and he assured me that if that had happened here in Massachusetts, long before it got to 37 times, the Fairhaven Police Department would have taken his gun license and confiscated his weapons. And so you see where this breakdown down there in Florida is tremendous, although I don't know that they have a law in Florida that would have allowed them to do what we can do here in Massachusetts.
There's legislation that's advancing state to state, dealing with protective orders that can be put on these type of situations in an emergency. Very hard to define. Right. I used to be a prosecutor, as you know,
yes.
The DA. So very hard to define some of those situations, but it's certainly worth the effort of going forward and dealing with it, because when you have so many red flags, clearly there should have been, he shouldn't have had those weapons.
Right.
And again, what I tried to impress on people is there's not one of these solutions by themselves, standalone solutions, that will solve the problem. But what we have to start doing is moving forward as we can. And we can. And there's consensus around this. And again, with so many issues, and I think I'll be talking to you this as we do this regularly, I hope, one of the problems we have in the House of Representatives in Congress is the fact that bills don't come on the floor for a vote. Even if there's a majority of people that support action on a bill, they're being withheld even from the most basic democratic process. Put it on the floor for a vote. Now,
is Bill Bulger a consultant to the Speaker of the House? Does that remind you of your days?
Then there was a mechanism in the old state Senate. I know I fought that fight too, as you're aware.
Yes. We'll have to talk about that sometime, not today.
And, I know in my district that every position I have, even on these issues of gun safety, I know there are people that have very strong objection to my position. But you know what they deserve? They deserve to know where my vote is.
Right.
So they can communicate to me, I don't appreciate that vote, I don't have this vote. And, what they're doing, frankly, is the polls are so strong on some of these issues, they're hiding behind and pressuring their own leadership. Please don't make me vote for this.
Right.
That's
right.
That's pretty weak.
Well, it's of course you probably know this. I assume you do. Maybe off the top of your head, you have 30 NRA affiliated gun clubs in your district, at least 30 in your district. So you're right. I mean, people want to know about where their congressman stands. Although, as we've pointed out, I don't think what happens there in Washington is going to affect what already has happened here in Massachusetts. We have
and I don't confuse the members of the NRA locally. I don't confuse them with some of the actions of their top leadership and some of the actions of people that I serve with in leadership in Congress not having votes. I mean, there's a great difference. I mentioned to you the person that's on the task force that I'm working with on gun safety. He's an NRA member.
Yeah, Congressman Thompson, right?
And a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah. No, I mean,
this is by the way.
Yeah, this is a very, very important discussion, and so it deserves, first of all, to be discussed. It deserves. It's funny that I brought up Bulger because yesterday I was mentioning that the old head of the Gun Owners Action League here in Massachusetts, he told me that one of the best guys for guns was Bill Bulger, because
is that Michael Yacino?
Yeah, Mike Yacino. Yeah. That Bill Bulger would kill the bills. That you could write any bill you wanted. So if you were, say, someone from Newton who wanted a gun control bill, fine, you could get it, you could talk about it, but it would never get to the floor.
It was that action, as you recall, that made me run against him for Senate president. And even though I wasn't successful at that turn, we did change the way Senate did business. The Senate did business here in Massachusetts. And part of what we're discussing, we have to change the way Congress does business as well, because regardless of which side of an issue you're on, you deserve to know how your representative is going to vote.
Right.
And you know what? People that put their name out for political office shouldn't be afraid to vote on something.
Right.
I mean, that is the epitome of being undemocratic and frankly, weak.
Yeah. Hey, we've been talking to Congressman William Keating here from Massachusetts. Congressman, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. You broke some news with us here, and I think this discussion on gun control is fascinating as well, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get together again next week. Yeah,
Chris, I don't know if you can translate to your site that clip that we gave you with Secretary Tillerson not being able to explain what Jared Kushner does or who he meets with. But I do think that I appreciate your giving some light to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll get that clip, Congressman. If I have to work with your office or have someone who's got more skills than I am work with your office to make sure we still have it here somewhere in the building. I know nothing about that stuff, but we have a great tech department. So this interview will all be up on YouTube, and we'll make sure we get that clip up as well, Congressman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Hey, have a great day. Good luck, and we'll talk to you next week. Folks, we'll take a quick break here. We're behind on commercials. Stick around. I'm going to go right back to the phones.